Ladies and gentlemen, a judge on the New York State Supreme Court has ruled in favor of Project Veritas, allowing its libel case against the New York Times to proceed. And what happened, it's very interesting. Veritas is taking the New York Times to court for a news report, so this was not an opinion, an op-ed. It was in the news section where journalists injected their opinions. So they made statements like deceptive. They used phrases like, well, this is a deceptive company or deceptive outlet, Project Veritas being known for twisting the truth. And what they did was they utilized Wikipedia. And what happens with Wikipedia is that within the Wikipedia article, there's a Media Matters citation and a Daily Beast and a Huffington Post and every left-leaning publication and left-leaning academics. So what you get from a lot of Wikipedia, a lot of Wikipedia references is, first of all, that's not really an authority on public discourse. So you can't simply say, well, we called this media outlet, we called Veritas deceptive because that's what is written within the Wikipedia page. And then you can't say that they're a company that bends the truth because left-leaning academics or researchers believe so. You have to actually prove that they have a problem with bending the truth that the Washington Post doesn't. The Washington Post literally fabricated quotes, offered a retraction saying, well, we didn't, a source told us that President Trump said these things. Apparently he didn't. CNN has offered almost certainly numerous, more retractions than Veritas ever did. CNN alone has offered easily 3 or 4 retractions from the past 4 years. Washington Post, numerous retractions. New York Times as well. And so you can look at these publications and say, are they being deceptive? Because they've had to, just in the Russia story, the myth, the hoax, within that obsession alone, Glenn Greenwald, he cited at least 10 stories that were patently false in CNN, the Washington Post, and other publications. And so, BuzzFeed, for example, published the Steele dossier. And then they got out of it in their libel suit. They actually won their lawsuit only because, not because anything was accurate within the dossier, because they said, well, the judge said, well, it was a government, the government was utilizing it, so therefore, it didn't violate a legal statute to publish information that was categorically false. But they might very well, and I hope they do, win this lawsuit. Hit subscribe right now to this channel. This is really interesting. I'll read you the Judge Wood's decision in his ruling. According to the complaint, the New York Times and the journalists were driven by resentment and journalistic competitiveness after the New York Times' much-hyped story about President Trump's tax returns was upstaged by Veritas' video report, as well as, quote, their own political bias against Veritas' perceived right-leanings. So they set out to discredit Veritas' reporting. Veritas asserts 5 counts of defamation, alleging the defendant published false and defamatory statements impugning Veritas' journalism with reckless disregard for the falsity of those statements. In the instant motion, defendants argue that Veritas failed to adequately plead and cannot demonstrate with clear and convincing evidence that there is a substantial basis in law and fact, that defendants acted with actual malice. Well, the suit went forward. Share this segment everywhere. It's really interesting. Judge Wood of the New York State Supreme Court, this is an honorable ruling. You're allowing the libel case to go forward. It's very difficult to win this type of defamation lawsuit, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand, to acknowledge that the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Daily Beast, Media Matters, MSNBC, CNN, Esquire, Vanity Fair, The Nation, Mother Jones, Time Magazine, The New Yorker, New York Magazine, The Atlantic, every publication out there has it in for Project Veritas and anyone like Project Veritas and James O'Keefe. So you have to ask yourself, is it difficult to prove malice? Well, a judge on the New York State Supreme Court acknowledged, yeah, it's almost certainly an issue. Let's move this forward. And then he writes, this is interesting. The court's view of the articles involves considering the full text of the article in which the purportedly defamatory statements were made. Actionable assertions of fact are tightly intertwined with the defendants now categorized the defendants now categorize as opinion. You can't put opinion in a news article, which is what takes place all the time. In part, defendants argue that their statements describing Veritas's video as deceptive, false, without evidence. You see, that's those statements are categorically false. There's evidence within the videos. The videos are not deceptive. Veritas claimed what was actually in those videos. Like, the words within those videos are so incriminating. This is what the Democratic Party does all the time. The words showing that Bernie Sanders was railroaded and the DNC sided with Clinton are now part of a Russian plot to inform you of what actually happened. So they're always trying to circumvent responsibility and conflate one thing with another. However, if a writer injects an opinion in a news article, and this is the judge of the New York State Supreme Court, Judge Wood, and will seek to claim legal protections as opinion, it stands as reason that the writer should have an obligation to alert the reader, which they didn't do, including a court that may need to determine whether it is fact or opinion, that it is opinion. The articles that are subject to this action called the video deceptive. There's nothing deceptive about it. What's deceptive and manipulative is saying that Trump praised and called the 1930s and 1940s Germans fine people. He never did. Within the C-SPAN quote itself, he states, and those people should be condemned. 3 different times he states that. Again, what you've heard about Trump, like, if you don't like Trump, if you don't like, Project Veritas, if you don't like James O'Keefe, if you don't like, conservatives, fine. But you don't have to lie and make things up about them. And that's what's happened all the time. So you have, this apoplectic reaction to things that Trump never said. He never called the pandemic a hoax. He was referring to the media obsession with blaming him solely for what took place, which now we see Andrew Cuomo was like the tyrant, was like a despot in New York. 15,000 lives are linked to Andrew Cuomo's decision to put infected people in elderly care facilities. But the definition of disinformation and deceptive provided by defendants' counsel certainly applies to the journalists' failure to note that they injected their opinion in news articles as they now claim. So this is hilarious. Plaintiff is entitled to try to establish whether the New York Times writers were purposely or recklessly inaccurate, and whether they were inaccurate, sloppy, or something else. Well, you better believe that every single incriminating tweet or Facebook post from the journalists and from the New York Times editors, the publication itself, James O'Keefe has. That's just one way I could think of to prove malice. It's not that difficult. It wouldn't be that difficult to prove. It really wouldn't. Give me your thoughts below. If Veritas wins this, and I hope they do, because when you have a New York State Supreme Court judge ruling in favor of Veritas to allow the libel suit against the New York Times, this is probably a great deal. This would be a much greater victory than Nicholas Sandmann. Well, actually, Nicholas Sandmann his victory over the Washington Post. I mean, amazing. But this would be another tremendous victory because you're dealing with, what Veritas does is a lot more honorable than what the New York Times does. With the New York Times, the Washington Post, well, you know what? What the New York Times and others like the Daily Beast or BuzzFeed or other publications, what they do is they deliberately try to disparage and ruin the reputation and just undermine people simply because they don't like a vantage point. Not because the person is like, that they're going after is a bad human being. It's strictly business for them in terms of demeaning and writing a hit piece. They have to engage in ad hominem attacks. That's how they roll. And that's public relations, not journalism. When you're not protected from defamation statutes if your intent is to engage in ad hominem disparaging hit pieces. That's not journalism, and that shouldn't be difficult for Project Veritas to prove. Big victory initially. Share this segment.